Why was everyone staring at her like she didn't belong? The air on the range was thick with salt, gunpowder, and something heavier, resentment. Carter kept her back straight, her Remington 700 pressed against her shoulder as if it were the only friend she had in the world. She didn't flinch when Commander Jackson's voice tore through the training facility, sharp and venomous. "You think you know where you are, rookie?" His words weren't just a challenge. They were a sentence, an unspoken warning that she was already guilty of trespassing into a world she wasn't meant for. Around her, drills stopped. 28 elite SEAL operators froze mid-motion, their attention snapping toward the lone woman on the firing line. The coastal wind whipped across the range, carrying fragments of dust and sea spray, but it wasn't the weather making her skin prickle. It was the silence, the stillness of men who wanted to see her fail. His green eyes stayed locked on Jackson as he stormed closer. He moved with the swagger of someone too used to owning every room, too used to obedience, too used to never being challenged. She didn't move, didn't break eye contact. And yet inside, her chest tightened. She could feel the burn of humiliation licking at the edges of her composure. She had known it would be like this. She had prepared herself for the smirks, the whispers, the suspicion. But knowing it and standing in the middle of it were two different battles. The rifle was wrenched from her hands with cruel force. Jackson's laugh cut through the air, sharp enough to slice skin. "This is SEAL Team 6's facility, not some girl's shooting club." A ripple of laughter passed through the gathered men, but it wasn't wholehearted. Some of it was nervous, some forced, like they weren't sure if it was safe to laugh. But enough joined in to make the sound sting. Kept her face neutral. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper almost lost to the ocean wind. "I'll try, sir." Jackson sneered. 15 moving targets, 6 minutes, winds gusting at 52 knots. Team record is 9 minutes 38. Think you can handle that, princess? Or are you just here to look pretty? He hurled the rifle back at her. The metal bit into her palms, but she caught it smoothly, almost gracefully, as though she'd been waiting for the insult, the weight, the test. Years of muscle memory steadied her hands. Off to the side, Master Chief Martinez froze mid-step. His sharp eyes caught a detail others missed, how she checked the weapon's action, how her fingers moved without hesitation, almost reverent, almost ritual. He had seen that motion once before, years ago, in Iraq. A ghost stirred in his memory, and for the first time that morning he felt unease twist in his gut. But no one else noticed. All eyes were on her, waiting to see her crack. The range stretched for 1,800 meters. Targets waited at impossible distances. The Pacific wind tore unpredictably across the open ground, swirling currents that could bend even the best marksman's bullet off course. Jackson wanted her humiliated. Everyone knew it. Everyone was waiting for it. Lowered herself into position. The rifle became part of her body. Her cheek rested against the worn stock, her breathing slowed until it matched the rhythm of the waves crashing beyond the dunes. She felt the familiar stillness settle over her, a quiet that no insult, no laugh, no stare could touch. The range officer's voice cut the silence. "All stations clear." Even the waves seemed to fade. Her crosshairs found the first target at 850 meters. It was moving left to right, slow but steady. Most would hesitate. She didn't. The rifle cracked, sharp and final. The target toppled before completing its exposure. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Jackson's smirk faltered, but his voice tried to mask it. Lucky shot. The second target appeared at 500 meters, faster this time. Tracked it for barely a breath before firing. Another clean hit. Her movements flowed, rifle, breath, trigger, crack, bolt work, acquire, crack. A rhythm precise and unshakable. By the fifth target, the crowd was no longer laughing. The silence grew heavy, almost reverent, as though they were watching something they couldn't explain. Martinez's throat tightened. She wasn't even using the wind flags anymore. She was reading the air itself, eyes narrowing on invisible currents, adjusting for forces only she seemed to see. Target 7 appeared at 1,200 meters. Erratic movement, gusts strong enough to make the ground shiver. No one would have blamed her for waiting, for holding back until the wind steadied. But she didn't. She shifted her hold, recalculated in a heartbeat, and squeezed the trigger. The target fell. Someone behind Martinez whispered, "That's impossible." It wasn't luck, it wasn't chance. It was something else, something deeper. Crack 8, crack 9, crack 10. Her focus was absolute, her face calm, almost serene. The rifle wasn't a tool in her hands, it was an extension of her. Martinez's memories flooded back like shrapnel tearing through flesh. Iraq, a sandstorm thick enough to blind even the most seasoned shooters. 12 SEALs trapped, death circling closer with every minute. And then the impossible shots. Bullets that bent through the storm as if guided by invisible hands. He remembered the name whispered in awe afterward. Sophia Carter. And now, watching this woman, Martinez felt the same chill climb his spine. By target 14, disbelief had spread through the entire formation. Jackson was no longer sneering. He was pale, his jaw set tight, his hands clenched. Something was breaking inside him as every bullet shattered the image of weakness he had tried to paint around her. The final target appeared at maximum range, weaving unpredictably, darting like prey that knew it was being hunted. Tracked for a second longer than before, calculating, adjusting. The wind gusted again, violent and wild. She didn't blink. The shot rang out, the target fell. The buzzer sounded. 5 minutes 23 seconds, the range officer announced, voice cracking with disbelief. New course record. Silence. Lowered her rifle. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply stood, calm eyes meeting the faces around her. No triumph, no mockery, only a quiet steadiness as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Jackson's face went from red to white to an unhealthy shade of gray. Around him, his men shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at with shock, others with something closer to admiration, a few with reverence as though they had witnessed something sacred. And then the screech of tires. A black SUV stopped at the edge of the range. The door opened and a figure stepped out, stars on his collar, a legend in flesh, General Hayes. The general's eyes swept the crowd, landed on, and for a moment, just a moment, his face softened. Recognition. Martinez's chest tightened. He knew that look. Hayes walked forward with purpose. "Sergeant Carter," he said quietly. The words hit the crowd like a detonation. Sergeant, not specialist, not rookie. Sergeant. Stood taller, but her jaw clenched. Her secret, carefully carried, fiercely protected, was cracking open. And Martinez thought, she hasn't told them who she really is. Not yet. But that truth was coming. And when it landed, it would change everything. What did the general see in her that none of them could? The silence clung to the range like a fog as the black SUV idled, engine still rumbling against the salt-stained air. Every operator in the circle shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between the commanding officer who had just been humiliated and the man who now approached with the quiet authority of someone who needed no introduction. General Hayes didn't move like Jackson. There was no swagger, no need to prove his weight. His presence did the proving for him. The lines on his weathered face carried more history than most of the men on that range could ever hope to understand. When his eyes settled on, the tension snapped taut. "Sergeant Carter," he said again, softer this time as though confirming something to himself. Jackson stiffened. His mouth opened as if to object, but no sound came. He was too stunned by the word, "Sergeant." His breath caught, but she forced her hands steady against the rifle she was still holding. Her gaze flickered, once, only once, to Martinez, and in that brief look, Martinez saw something no one else could. A crack, a plea, as if she were silently asking him to keep quiet about what he suspected. But Martinez said nothing. He only swallowed, his throat dry, and returned her look with a nod she barely noticed. The crowd of operators was restless now, whispering, trading quick, sharp glances. For 4 days they had treated her like an intruder, a distraction, a mistake. Now the air shifted. Now there was confusion, even fear. Jackson finally found his voice, though it trembled at the edges. "Sir, this is our assigned support specialist. She's not." Hayes cut him off with a gesture. "I know exactly who she is, Commander." The weight of his tone silenced even the gulls that circled above the Pacific. "The question is, why don't you?" The words were not shouted. They didn't need to be. They were worse than shouting, measured, deliberate, a surgeon's cut to the bone. Pulse thundered in her ears. She had dreaded this moment. She had wanted her actions, not her name, to speak first. But the general had forced the hand of fate, and now there was no retreat. Still, she said nothing. She only lowered the rifle, cleared the chamber, and placed it gently on the table beside her. Hayes's eyes never left her. "Your father would have recognized you the moment you took that first shot," he said quietly. The whispers in the crowd swelled. "Father, recognized." The questions rippled like shockwaves, but no one dared speak them aloud. Closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. She wanted to disappear, to slip back into anonymity before the weight of the name crushed her. But she couldn't. Not anymore. Jackson's hands curled into fists. His authority, his control, was slipping through his fingers. He tried to seize it back with cruelty. "With respect, sir, we don't have time for riddles. Whoever she is, she's still a liability. My men." "Your men," Hayes interrupted, "just watched her set a record none of you could touch." His voice was calm, but it carried the sharpness of a blade. "What you saw out here wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. And it damn sure wasn't politics." Jackson's face hardened, but his eyes betrayed something darker: fear. Martinez stepped forward before he realized he was moving. He didn't address Jackson. He didn't even look at him. His voice was low, meant only for the general. "Sir, it can't be, not after all these years." Hayes nodded once, solemn. "Yes, it can." The realization slammed into Martinez like a bullet to the chest. He looked back really looked at her, and the memory of that sandstorm came roaring back. The impossible shots. The man who had made them. The man who had saved his life. Samuel Carter. And now her. Shifted uncomfortably under Martinez's gaze, under all of them. She wanted to scream. To run. To demand that they stop staring at her like she was a ghost of someone she wasn't sure she could live up to. Instead, she steadied her voice. "I didn't ask for this." The words fell into the silence like stones, dropped into deep water. No one responded, not yet. Jackson finally found footing in the only thing he had left: anger. "It doesn't matter who she is. This is a combat unit, not a place for sentiment." He spit the word like venom, as if sentiment was a disease that could infect his men. Felt heat rise in her chest, not from shame but from fury. She looked at him, eyes steady, voice firm. "It matters to me." The crowd seemed to flinch as one. No one spoke to Jackson like that. No one dared. But she had. And that small defiance was heavier than any bullet she had fired that morning. Hayes studied her for a long moment, then turned back to Jackson. "I'll be speaking with you later, Commander. For now, I want her debriefed." His eyes returned to, "privately." The general's words were final, irrefutable. Jackson's face twisted, but he saluted sharply and said nothing more. As the formation broke, the operators scattered in silence, some stealing glances at, others pointedly avoiding her. Respect had not yet replaced suspicion, but the ground had shifted. Something had cracked open. Martinez lingered. When bent to collect her bag, he stepped closer, his voice low. "Your father once told me the best shooters don't chase respect. They earn it by what they do when no one is watching." Froze, her breath catching at the words she hadn't heard in years. Martinez's eyes softened. "I saw him do the impossible once, and today I saw you do the same." For the first time since she'd arrived, her composure faltered. A flicker of grief, sharp and raw, crossed her face. She quickly looked away. "I don't want to talk about him," she said, almost pleading. Martinez nodded, though his heart ached. He recognized the pain. He carried his own. "Then don't, just know you don't have to carry it alone." She shouldered her bag and walked away before he could say more. That night sat alone in the barracks. The facility was quiet, the sound of the ocean muffled by steel and concrete. Her fingers traced the edge of her watch, her father's watch, the only piece of him she had left. She could still hear his voice, calm and steady, teaching her how to breathe with the rifle, how to find stillness when the world spun. She hated that the general had spoken his name, hated that Martinez had seen too much in her, because now the ghosts were awake again and sleep felt impossible. Across the compound, Jackson sat in his office, the glow of a desk lamp casting deep shadows across his face. His hands shook as he poured a drink, though he tried to hide it even from himself. His brother's name haunted him. His failure haunted him. And now this woman, this Carter, had torn open scars he thought had hardened long ago. He told himself he hated her, but deep down a darker truth gnawed at him. He didn't hate her. He hated what she reminded him of his own weakness. Outside, the wind carried the sound of waves breaking endlessly against the shore. The night stretched long, and no one slept easy. Because they all knew something had changed. And none of them could see where it would lead. What was the general going to ask her that no one else dared? The room was stark, stripped of anything unnecessary. A metal table, 2 chairs, the hum of fluorescent lights. The kind of space designed to hold secrets without judgment, though the walls seemed to listen anyway. Sat rigid, her equipment bag at her feet, the faint smell of gun oil clinging to her clothes. Across from her, General Hayes leaned forward, his weathered hands folded loosely, his eyes studying her the way a surgeon might examine a wound before deciding whether it could be saved. For a long time, he said nothing. The silence pressed down until felt her pulse racing in her throat. She hated silence like this. It always reminded her of the pauses before someone delivered bad news. Finally, his voice broke through, low and measured. "You didn't tell them." His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She didn't look away. "No." "Why?" Her throat was dry, but she forced the words out. "Because I don't want to be defined by him. I wanted them to see me, not his ghost." Hayes nodded slowly as if he'd expected that answer but still needed to hear it. "And yet, you move like him. You shoot like him. Every man out there saw it. They'll know soon enough." She closed her eyes for a beat, then opened them, her voice steady but raw. "Then let it be because of what I did today, not because of what he did." The general leaned back, his gaze softening. "Do you know what your father told me once? He said the measure of a soldier isn't in the shots they take, but in the ones they choose not to." Her chest tightened at the words. They were familiar, too familiar. She had heard them in her father's voice, late nights in the backwoods of Virginia when she was 7 years old, her hands too small for the rifle he insisted she learn to respect. For a moment she was there again. The air had been damp with summer humidity, cicadas buzzing in the distance. Her father's broad frame crouched beside her, his hands guiding hers, steady and patient. His eyes, green like hers, fixed on her every movement. "Don't chase the target, Soph," he'd whispered. "Wait, let it come to you, breathe with it, feel the space between you and the shot, and when the moment's right, it'll tell you." She had nodded, too young to understand the weight behind his words, but sensing that they mattered, that everything he said mattered. The memory snapped away as Hayes spoke again. "You carry his lessons like armor, but armor can get heavy, Sergeant, heavy enough to drown a soldier." Straightened in her chair, anger flickering behind her calm. "I didn't ask for this armor. I didn't ask for his name to follow me." "No," Hayes said softly, "but here you are. And whether you like it or not, his shadow walks into every room before you do. The question is, will you let it crush you, or will you use it to light your own path? The weight of his gaze was almost unbearable. She wanted to argue, to fight, but the truth was too sharp, too close. She looked away, her hands curling into fists. Hayes let the silence settle again, then leaned forward. Jackson is rattled. You broke something in him today. He'll either bury it or he'll come for you. His eyes snapped back to his. I can handle Jackson. Hayes studied her, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't have to, but sometimes the battles that matter aren't against enemies. They're against the people standing next to us. She swallowed, her jaw tight. Then I'll fight that one too. Hayes exhaled slowly, as though he carried the weight of too many wars. I'll modify your orders. You're staying with Team 6. But understand this, every move you make from here on isn't just yours. It carries weight. With them, with me, with the entire community. Her voice dropped, almost breaking. I didn't want the weight. He met her eyes, and for the first time she thought she saw not the general but the man behind the rank. Tired, haunted. None of us ever do. The meeting ended with no further words. Hayes left her with more questions than answers, and when the door clicked shut behind him, sat alone in the fluorescent hum, fighting the sting in her eyes. She told herself she wouldn't cry, not here, not now. But alone she did. Across the compound, Jackson sat in his office, the shadows stretching long against the walls. He had replayed the record-breaking shots in his mind until they carved holes in his confidence. Every round she fired had torn another piece of his authority away, and now Hayes's words echoed louder than the gunfire. Why don't you know who she is? He poured another drink, but it didn't steady his hands. He told himself it wasn't fear. It was anger. Anger that this woman, this uninvited storm, had disrupted the order he had built, the command he ruled. But deep inside, where he couldn't admit it even to himself, there was a different ache. His brother's face, his brother's name, the one he hadn't saved, the one Samuel Carter had saved instead. And now his daughter stood here, a living reminder of his failure. Jackson's hatred wasn't for her alone, it was for himself. Martinez, meanwhile, couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the floor, the whispers of memory chasing him. He had seen death too many times. He had buried too many brothers. And yet what he had seen today, calm, her precision, had unsettled him in a way combat never had. Because it wasn't just skill, it was something more, something that echoed. He remembered the way Samuel Carter had looked at him that night in Iraq, through the haze of sand and fire. Get them home, Samuel had said after the impossible shots, after saving 12 SEALs from certain death. Get them home, Martinez. And now his daughter was here, carrying his name, carrying his skill, carrying his ghosts. Martinez closed his eyes, whispering into the dark. How the hell am I supposed to protect her, Sam? Lay in her bunk that night, the watch pressed against her chest, her breaths uneven. Sleep hovered out of reach. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the men on the range, the disbelief in Jackson's eyes, the recognition in Hayes's. She thought of her father again, his hand steadying hers, his voice patient. She thought of the funeral, the folded flag, the way she had walked away from everyone who tried to comfort her. She thought of the years she had spent trying to prove herself, not for them, but against the ache inside that told her she never could. The night was endless. The ocean roared in the distance, relentless, eternal. And in the shadows of every soul in the compound carried their own sleepless weight. Because tomorrow would not be easier. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. Why did it feel like every step she took was under a microscope? The morning sun bled across horizon, the Pacific wind sharp with salt as the operators assembled on the range again. Their faces were stone, their expressions unreadable, but felt their eyes, always watching, always waiting. She wasn't just another soldier to them. She was a question mark, an intruder, a burden wrapped in a name that carried more weight than she had asked for. Commander Jackson stood in front of the formation, his jaw tight, his voice clipped. Today isn't about records. It's about teamwork. It's about survival. And survival, he paused, his eyes cutting toward like a blade, depends on everyone pulling their weight. The message was clear. This was about her. The drill was simple in theory, brutal in practice. A live-fire hostage rescue simulation, complete with urban mock-up, smoke, noise, chaos. The kind of exercise designed to expose weakness. Mistakes didn't just fail the mission, they put teammates in danger. Checked her gear silently, her movements efficient. Her hands didn't shake, but her chest felt tight. She'd been in simulations before. She'd trained for chaos. But this wasn't just another exercise. This was a stage, and Jackson had set the trap. Martinez caught her eye briefly from across the staging area. He didn't say a word, but his look spoke volumes. Steady. Breathe. You've got this. Jackson laid out the plan in sharp, clipped sentences. Teams would breach the mock building, clear each floor, and recover the hostage before time ran out. Roles were assigned quickly. Noticed hers overwatch on the rooftop, covering the breach team. A sniper's role. Her role. But the weapon she was handed made her pulse spike. An older model, ill-maintained, its scope slightly misaligned. She didn't need to fire a round to know it was compromised. She glanced at Jackson. His smirk told her everything. It was sabotage. She could have spoken up. She could have refused. But instead, she adjusted the scope with careful hands, running calculations in her head, compensating, adapting. That was what her father had taught her. You didn't always get the weapon you wanted. You made the weapon you had work. The simulation began with the shriek of a siren. Smoke poured from canisters, gunfire cracked through the compound, operators shouting as they breached. The chaos was immediate, overwhelming. Dropped into position on the rooftop, her eye to the scope, heart hammering. The crosshairs wavered not from her hand but from the faulty alignment. She exhaled slowly, adjusting her hold, calculating drift and wind. The first hostile silhouette appeared through the smoke. She fired. The round cracked through the haze, clipping the target a fraction low but clean enough to neutralize. Her radio crackled. "Sniper 1, check your aim." Jackson's voice, sharp and accusatory. She bit back a reply, adjusting again, waiting. Another hostile popped from cover. She tracked, compensated, fired. This time the hit was dead center. Down below, the team advanced, clearing rooms, dragging the mock hostage through the chaos. Covered every move, her shots carving space for them to breathe. But each time she fired, Jackson's voice needled in her ear. "Too slow. Watch your sector. You're going to get someone killed." The words dug deep, not because they were true, but because the men around him believed him. She could feel it, the doubt creeping into their movements, the hesitation in their trust. Halfway through the drill, a target appeared at distance, fast and erratic. Tracked it, compensating for the misaligned scope. Her finger tightened on the trigger, and then the wind shifted, sudden and violent. The bullet clipped wide, the target escaping. The radio erupted. "Sniper failed, repeat, sniper failed." Jackson's voice thundered through the channel, amplified, cruel. The breach team faltered, exposed in the open. Martinez barked orders, dragging them forward, filling the gap. His tone was sharp, steady, but his chest burned with anger. He knew what Jackson was doing. He could see it. But he couldn't intervene. Not yet. His lungs burned. Her vision blurred with shame and rage, but she forced herself steady. Adjust. Breathe. Fire. The next 3 targets dropped clean, one after another. She refused to let the mistake define her. The drill ended with the mock hostage extracted, the siren cutting off abruptly. The silence that followed was heavier than the smoke still curling in the air. Jackson's voice broke it. "Debrief now." The operators gathered in a circle, sweat dripping, chests heaving. Stood among them, her rifle slung, her face calm though her pulse thundered. Jackson paced like a predator. "You saw it, all of you. One miss. One hesitation, that's all it takes. One shot off and a teammate dies. This isn't a game. This isn't about records. It's about trust. And right now we don't have that. His words were poison, seeping into the cracks of doubt already forming. Some of the men avoided her eyes. A few glanced at her, uncertain. Martinez stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "With respect, Commander, the team completed the mission. No one was lost. She did her job." Jackson's eyes narrowed. Did she, or did we have to cover for her mistake? Felt the weight of every gaze. She wanted to defend herself, to explain the sabotage, the faulty weapon, but she stayed silent, because defending herself would sound like excuse, and excuses were weakness. Instead, she lifted her chin, her voice steady. "If I failed, it won't happen again." The simplicity of it cut through the tension. No excuses, no defense, just resolve. For a long moment no one spoke, then Jackson sneered, "We'll see." The circle broke, operators dispersing in silence. Some avoided her. Some looked at her differently, not with respect but with curiosity. Something had shifted, small but undeniable. Martinez approached quietly as packed her gear. "You handled that better than most would." She didn't look up. It wasn't enough. "Maybe not for him," Martinez said softly, "but some of us saw the truth." She paused, finally meeting his gaze. His eyes weren't pitying. They were steady, solid, and in them she felt something she hadn't expected here, an ally. That night she sat again with her father's watch in her hand, staring at its worn face. She remembered his words, "The rifle isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. You will miss. What matters is what you do after." She whispered into the darkness, barely audible even to herself, "I won't miss again." Across the compound, Jackson stood alone in his office, staring at the after-action report on his desk. His hands trembled as he clenched the paper. He told himself it was anger, but the truth gnawed at him, relentless. He had tried to break her, and she hadn't broken. Not yet. What if the first mistake in combat wasn't hers, but his? The C-130 shuddered as it cut through the night sky, its interior dim, filled with the low thrum of engines and the steady breathing of men who had been here too many times before. The team sat strapped in, their gear packed tight, weapons across their laps. No one spoke. Conversation in these moments was rare, too much weight in the air. Sat among them, her helmet loose on her knee, her rifle case resting against her boots. She could feel their eyes even when they weren't looking directly at her. She had earned something on the range, though she couldn't yet name it. Not trust, not acceptance, something in between. Curiosity, maybe. Martinez sat across from her, his gaze calm but protective, though he tried to hide it. He had seen too many rookies fall apart on their first drop. He had seen too many men crumble under the noise and fire of the real thing. But there was something different about her, something that made him believe, even when Jackson's venom said otherwise. Jackson sat near the front, his arms crossed, his expression stone. He had briefed the mission with his usual precision, a high-value target in a hostile compound, rapid breach extraction. But beneath his words had felt it, the hostility, the doubt. The warning, unspoken but clear, "Don't screw this up." Her stomach tightened as the red light blinked overhead. 10 minutes. Her first operation with them wasn't a simulation. It wasn't a drill. This was real. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying her breath. Her father's voice whispered through memory, "When the world spins, you hold still. When chaos roars, you listen for silence. It's there, waiting for you." The ramp dropped, night air flooding in, cold and sharp. They moved like shadows, dropping into darkness, the desert stretching endless beneath a moonless sky. The target compound was a sprawl of mud walls and rusted gates, lit by the faint glow of lanterns. Armed guards paced the perimeter. Dogs barked faintly in the distance. Every sound carried. Every movement mattered. Climbed into her position on a ridge overlooking the compound, her rifle assembling smoothly under her hands. The scope aligned perfectly this time. Martinez had seen to it, though he hadn't said a word. She could feel the steadiness in her grip, the familiar rhythm in her breathing. The team moved into position below, shadows slipping against shadows. Her comms crackled softly. "Overwatch set," whispered. Jackson's voice came back sharp. "Just do your job." She forced the sting down. "Focus." Two guards approached the eastern gate, weapons slung casually. She tracked them, adjusted for distance, waited until the timing was right. One breath, one squeeze. The first man dropped silently. Before the second could react, her rifle cracked again. Both down. The breach team slipped through the gate seconds later, unhindered. The mission flowed in bursts of chaos and silence. Covered their advance, her shots carving a path clean through the dark. Every round mattered. Every second counted. She didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She just moved. But then it happened. Jackson's team cleared the lower rooms, pushing upward. A sudden burst of gunfire erupted close, too close. A man screamed through comms. Chaos surged. Snapped to her scope, scanning. She saw it, a hostile on the second-floor balcony, hidden until the last second, muzzle flashing as he fired down on the team. She adjusted, finger tightening, but Jackson's voice cut in sharp and commanding. "Hold your fire, we've got it." She froze, crosshairs locked on the shooter, her chest tightened. She had the shot, she could end it now. Another burst of fire tore through the comms. Martinez's voice shouted orders. More chaos. His teeth clenched. "I have the shot," she whispered urgently. "Negative," Jackson barked. "Stand down." Her heart pounded. Seconds dragged like hours. The hostile reloaded, muzzle swinging back toward the stairwell. She couldn't wait, she wouldn't. Her father's words echoed. The rifle isn't about permission. It's about responsibility. Her finger pulled, the rifle cracked, the hostile dropped. Silence snapped through the comms. Jackson's voice erupted, fury laced through every word. "You disobeyed a direct order." But Martinez's voice cut over him, steady, sharp. "She saved your men, move." The team surged forward, clearing the rest of the compound. Stayed locked in her position, her breath steady despite the storm in her chest. Minutes later the call came. Target secured, extraction in 2. The mission was over, the hostage was safe, the team was intact. But the storm was only beginning. Back at base, the debrief was tense, suffocating. The operators sat in silence, sweat and dust still clinging to them. Jackson paced, his voice cutting sharp. She compromised command. She undermined the chain. That kind of insubordination gets people killed. Sat still, her hands clenched in her lap. She didn't look at him. She looked at Martinez. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Hayes's voice, calm but heavy, filled the room. He had flown in for the mission, observing from afar. And yet no one died. The target is secured. The team is alive. His gaze moved too, because of her. The silence was suffocating. Jackson's jaw clenched, his fists tight. "Sir, with respect." "No," Hayes interrupted. "With respect, Commander, I've watched your men for years. I've seen mistakes. I've buried men because of hesitation. What I saw tonight wasn't hesitation. It was clarity. You may not like her, you may not trust her, but she just proves she belongs here." Jackson's face burned red, but he couldn't argue. Not in front of Hayes, not in front of the team. Finally spoke, her voice steady, though her chest trembled inside. "I don't want to undermine command, but if I see a shot that saves lives, I'll take it. Every time." Her words hung in the air, undeniable. Hayes leaned back, his expression unreadable. Then that settled. The debrief ended, the team dispersing into the night. Some glanced at her differently now, not with suspicion but with something harder to name. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. Jackson lingered, his eyes dark, his jaw tight. He said nothing as he left, but felt it. The storm inside him, the danger it carried. Later, alone in her bunk, she traced the face of her father's watch again. She whispered into the dark, "I took the shot, Dad. I took it because you would have. But even as she said it, another thought burned inside her. Was it really his voice guiding her, or her own? Why did silence in the compound feel heavier than gunfire in the field? The mission had ended hours ago, the dust washed from their gear, weapons cleaned and stowed. But the air around the barracks hadn't cleared. It lingered thick, charged, every conversation clipped short the moment walked into the room. She felt it in the hallways, the way voices dipped to murmurs when she passed, the way men who had nodded at her after the firefight now looked away, uncertain, conflicted. Some of them respected her now. That much was clear. They had seen her shot, seen how it saved lives. But respect was fragile here, tangled in loyalty and pride. And Jackson was cutting at it with every word, every glare. At dinner, the mess hall buzzed with low chatter. Sat at the end of a table, her tray untouched. She listened more than she ate. The conversations floated around her, fragments of doubt, admiration, resentment. She shouldn't have disobeyed. Hell, she saved my ass. That balcony guy had me dead to rights. Doesn't matter, you follow orders or people die. Or you bend orders when lives are on the line. There's a difference. The words twisted in her chest. She wanted to slam her tray down and shout that she hadn't acted out of arrogance, that she hadn't done it to prove a point. She had done it because hesitation kills, because she couldn't watch them fall. But she didn't shout. She sat in silence, her jaw tight, her hand clenched around her fork until her knuckles whitened. Jackson sat across the hall, surrounded by his closest men. His voice carried just enough to be heard. Chain of command keeps us alive. Anyone who undermines it undermines the team. Doesn't matter how pretty the shot looks. Pulse spiked. She forced herself to breathe to keep her expression neutral, but inside the words dug deep. Pretty shot. As if her bullet had been for show, as if the man on the balcony hadn't been seconds from killing them. Martinez slid onto the bench beside her, his tray clattering quietly. He didn't look at her, didn't draw attention. He just ate, quietly, calmly. Then, in a low voice, he said, "You don't have to win them all today." Swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Feels like I don't win any of them." Martinez's jaw flexed as he chewed. "Trust doesn't come easy here. You know that, but they saw the shot. They know the truth, even if they won't say it yet." Her voice cracked at the edges. "And Jackson." Martinez's eyes flicked briefly to the other table, then back to his food. "Jackson's fighting a war he doesn't even understand. It's not about you. It's about him." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because part of her believed it wasn't true, that it was about her, that it had always been about her. Later that night, she lay awake in the barracks, the steady hum of the bass pressing around her. She traced the worn face of her father's watch again, her thumb brushing the scratches on the glass. "Would you have taken the shot, Dad?" she whispered in her mind. "Would you have waited? Would you have listened to the order?" No answer came, just the silence heavy as the desert sky. Jackson in his office poured another drink he didn't need. His reflection stared back at him in the dark window, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. He replayed the moment over and over. The balcony, the voice in his comms, the crack of her rifle disobeying him. She had saved them, he couldn't deny that. But she had done it by cutting his legs out from under him, in front of his men, in front of Hayes. And worse, the look in their eyes after. Some of them had looked at her the way they used to look at him, with belief. His hand tightened around the glass until it threatened to shatter. "Not on my team," he muttered. "Not her." Martinez lay awake too, staring at the ceiling of his quarters. The memory of Samuel Carter pressed on him like a ghost. He had seen this before, a man who bent the impossible into possible, who carried the weight of others without complaint. And now his daughter walked the same path, though every step seemed lined with barbed wire. He wanted to shield her, to step between her and Jackson's bitterness. But he knew better. You didn't protect someone like by fighting their battles for them. You protected them by standing steady when the storm hit. And the storm was coming. He could feel it in his bones. 2 days later, the team gathered for another drill. This one, night navigation, urban combat under blackout conditions. Every man moved in pairs, silent and sharp. Was paired with a quiet lieutenant whose eyes held more thought than his words ever did. The exercise began under cover of darkness, the compound's mock streets twisting with shadows. They moved fast, clearing corners, marking targets. His rifle was steady, her movements precise, followed without hesitation. But Jackson hovered over comms, his voice sharp, clipped. "Carter, you're dragging your pace. Carter, your angles are sloppy. Carter, you'll get someone killed like that." Each word was a needle pricking at her focus. She ignored it as best she could, but the weight pressed harder. Her shots were clean, her movements efficient, yet his voice made every step feel wrong. At one corner, a sudden burst of simulated fire cracked from the dark. Dropped into cover, pivoted, returning precise shots. The targets dropped, clean, fast. But Jackson's voice sliced in. "Late, you're late. That hesitation costs lives." Her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. She hadn't hesitated. She knew she hadn't. But under his command, truth twisted until even victories felt like failures. When the exercise ended, Jackson's debrief was brutal. He dissected her every move, every shot, painting mistakes where there had been none. His words weren't training. They were knives. The men listened in silence, some nodding, some shifting uncomfortably. Martinez's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Not yet. Afterward lingered as packed her gear. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "For what it's worth, you weren't late." Paused, meeting his eyes. For the first time, someone besides Martinez had said it out loud. Recognition. Validation. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Thanks," she whispered. That night she sat on the edge of her bunk, the weight pressing heavier than before. She was caught between two wars, the one outside and the one inside these walls. And some days the inside war felt harder. She whispered again into the dark, her hand on her father's watch. "I don't know how long I can keep this up." But the watch was silent. The ghosts gave no answers. Across the base, Jackson stared at the roster pinned to his wall, his finger tracing her name. His voice was a low growl. "You won't last. I'll make sure of it." And in the stillness, Martinez lay awake again, staring into the dark, his gut heavy with a truth he could no longer ignore. Wasn't just fighting for respect. She was fighting to survive her own team. How many lives would it take before pride killed them? The briefing room was tense, the air thick with exhaustion and mistrust. Maps spread across the table, red markers circled around a target village deep in hostile territory. The mission: secure an arms dealer before his convoy vanished across the border. High risk, short window, little margin for error. Commander Jackson's voice cut through the room, crisp but colder than ever. "We move at 200, silent insertion. Carter, you'll cover from the ridge. Everyone else moves on my lead." Sat straight-backed, her face calm. She didn't argue, but she caught the flicker of unease in Martinez's eyes, the quiet disapprovalence. They had all seen how Jackson's commands bent against her, how his voice cut sharper when directed her way. And yet no one spoke against him. Not here. Not now. At 1:30, they moved out under a starless sky. The night swallowed sound, the desert stretching wide and endless. Climbed into overwatch position as the team fanned below, shadows gliding between ruined walls and scrub brush. Her rifle rested steady against her shoulder, scope glinting faintly as she scanned the horizon. Movement flickered, 3 guards near the outer perimeter. She tracked them, adjusted, and whispered over comms. 3 tangos east side, 60 meters. Martinez's voice came calm. "Copy." But Jackson cut in. "Negative, hold fire, we pass them." His brow furrowed. The guards were too close. Their patrol arc would sweep the team in minutes. She adjusted again, finger hovering on the trigger. "Commander," Martinez said carefully, "we won't clear the gap in time." "Stand down," Jackson barked. "We passed them." His chest burned. She had the shot. 3 rounds, 3 clean drops. But Jackson's voice was iron, his pride pressing against her trigger finger. Seconds stretched. The guards turned. Their flashlights cut across the sand and landed on movement. Shouts erupted. Gunfire split the silence. The ambush was instant. Hostile fire raked the team from multiple angles, the compound erupting with noise and chaos. Operators dove for cover, Martinez barking orders, dragging one man out of a hail of bullets. His heart hammered. She snapped to her scope, dropping the first hostile in a clean shot, then another, then another. Her rifle cracked again and again, carving windows of survival for the team below. "Carter," Jackson's voice screamed over comms, fury bleeding through static. "You compromised my order." She ignored him. She couldn't afford the luxury of pride. Every bullet mattered. Every second counted. She moved faster than thought, faster than doubt, her rifle flowing like an extension of her heartbeat. The team fought their way into cover, pushing forward in bursts. The arms dealer's convoy revved inside the compound, engines roaring to life. Time was bleeding away. Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. "We need that convoy stopped now." Track the lead vehicle, her mind racing. The distance was brutal, the target moving fast. She adjusted, calculated, squeezed. Her shot cracked through the night, a tire burst, the vehicle skidding sideways in sparks and dust. The convoy jammed, the team surging on the opening. Explosions shook the ground as charges went off, the air thick with smoke and shouting. The arms dealer was pulled down, cuffed, secured. The mission was won, but barely. And in the silence after, the cost hung heavy. 2 men were injured, one badly, shrapnel tearing through his leg, and everyone knew why. Everyone had seen it. Because Jackson had refused to let her fire. Back at base, the debrief was suffocating. The injured were in med bay, the rest sat in silence as Jackson paced like a caged predator. His face was pale, his jaw rigid, but his voice thundered with false certainty. Carter disobeyed again. She broke command. She endangered the team. Sat still, her eyes locked on him. She felt the weight of the men around her, the conflict in their silence. She could taste the moment bending, stretching, ready to snap. Martinez stood. His voice was steady, but fire burned beneath. "That's not what happened. She had the shot before the guards ever saw us. You told her to stand down. That hesitation cost us 2 wounded." The room froze. No one ever spoke to Jackson like that. Jackson's eyes blazed. "Careful, Master Chief." "No, Commander," Martinez's voice sharpened. "Careful is what almost got us killed out there. She saved us again, and you know it." A murmur rippled through the room. Operators shifted, glancing at, then back at Jackson. The silence was cracking. Jackson's fist slammed the table. "You think she belongs here because she can shoot. You think that makes her one of us. She doesn't understand this team, this life. She's a liability, a name in the wrong place at the wrong time." The words hit like blows, but something inside her steadied. She rose to her feet, her voice quiet but unflinching. "You want to talk about names? Fine. You want to talk about what I don't understand? Then let's talk about it." Her eyes burned into his. "My father was Samuel Carter, Reaper Carter, the man who saved 12 SEALs in when everyone else thought it was impossible. One of those men was Martinez. Another," her voice caught but she forced it steady, "was your brother." The room went silent. Jackson froze, his face drained of color, his chest heaving like he'd been punched. His voice didn't waver. "You think I don't understand this life? I grew up watching it steal him piece by piece until there was nothing left to give. And then I buried him. I didn't want his name. I didn't want his shadow, but it's mine, and I won't run from it anymore." Tears burned her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She stood tall, her gaze locked on Jackson's. "My father taught me that respect isn't given, it's earned. And I don't want yours handed to me because of his ghost. I'll earn it with my actions the same way he did, the same way I just did. The silence stretched thick and unbroken. Some of the men looked at her with shock, some with awe. Martinez's eyes glistened with memory, his chest tight with pride. Jackson stood trembling, torn open. For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. Then he whispered, raw and broken. "My brother, he wrote about your father, said he was the reason he came home, said he was the best man he ever knew." His throat tightened, but her voice held. "Then honor him, honor them both. Don't dishonor their memory by turning it into hate." Jackson staggered back, his hands shaking, his face carved with something between rage and grief. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The debrief ended without another word. The team filed out, their silence different now. Heavy, yes, but shifted. Something had broken open. Sat alone afterward, her father's watch warm in her palm. For the first time, she didn't feel its weight as a chain. She felt it as an anchor, a reminder. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. Sometimes it just stands. How much trust could be built in a single heartbeat when everything depended on it? The call came before dawn, shattering what little rest the team had found. A hostile cell had fortified itself deep in the mountains, armed with stolen tech and the will to use it. Intelligence was shaky. The terrain was brutal, but the order was simple: go in, clear the threat, and come back alive. The helicopter blades thundered against the pre-dawn dark, whipping sand into stinging storms as the team boarded. Faces were set, jaws clenched. No one spoke. This wasn't the time for words. Checked her rifle one last time, hands steady despite the churn in her chest. She could feel the shift around her. Men who had once doubted her now glanced her way, not with suspicion, but with something quieter. Expectation. Belief, maybe. She wasn't sure yet if she believed it herself. Jackson sat across from her, helmet in his lap, his eyes hidden in shadow. He hadn't spoken since the debrief 2 nights ago, since her name, her father's name, had cracked open the silence between them. His jaw was tight, but there was something different in him. Not softer, but less certain. As if he was standing at the edge of something he didn't yet understand. The helo dropped them into a narrow valley, steep cliffs rising like jagged teeth on both sides. The air was thin, sharp in their lungs. Shadows stretched long across the rocks as the team advanced, weapons ready, every sense straining. The compound came into view, crude stone walls, sandbag emplacements, guards packing under dim lanterns. Climbed into overwatch on the ridge, her rifle steady against the cold earth. The team crept forward, shadows blending with shadows, and then the crack of gunfire split the stillness. Shouts erupted. The compound came alive, hostile fire pouring down from hidden nests along the cliffs. The team dove for cover, pinned in the open. The valley had become a kill box. Snapped to her scope, tracking targets. Her rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times, nests silenced, guards dropping. She cleared angles with lethal precision, her shots opening slivers of survival for the team below. "Carter, keep them off us." Martinez's voice cut through comms, sharp but steady. "I've got you," she whispered, finger flowing against the trigger. But there were too many. Hostiles pressed from every angle, the valley erupting with chaos. The team's advance stalled, trapped against the rocks. Jackson's voice came sharp, urgent. "We can't stay pinned, push left now." Martinez countered instantly. "Negative, the left flank's loaded with crossfire." Scanned, her breath steady despite the storm in her chest. Her scope caught it, a path, narrow and dangerous but real. A gap in the, just wide enough to break through. She keyed comms. "There's a corridor, 12 o'clock, 60 meters, I can clear it." Jackson's voice cut in, sharp and raw. "Negative, that's suicide, hold position." His pulse thundered. She had the angle, she knew it. Her father's voice echoed again in memory. "Trust what you see, Soph, even when no one else does." "I can do it," she said quietly. The silence on comms stretched a second too long, and then Martinez's voice firm. "Take it." Her rifle cracked. One hostile dropped, then another. She moved faster, sharper, her shots carving the corridor open. The team surged forward, sprinting through the narrow path, rounds snapping overhead, clearing every angle before it could close. Jackson ran with them, his breath ragged in calms, his commands faltering into silence as the reality unfolded. She wasn't just covering them. She was carrying them. They burst into the compound, breaching walls, clearing rooms in a storm of shouts and fire. Shifted positions, her rifle never still, every shot timed like the beat of a drum. The fight was brutal, close, and desperate, but piece by piece the resistance crumbled, hostiles fell, rooms cleared, and finally silence. The compound was secure. Breath ragged, sweat dripping, the team regrouped in the courtyard. Dust hung in the air, the faint smell of cordite clinging to everything. Jackson stood in the center, chest heaving, helmet tucked under his arm. His face was pale, his eyes unreadable. He looked across the courtyard, not with contempt, not with fury, but with something heavier. Something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Respect. He walked toward her slowly, every step deliberate. The men watched, silent, the weight of the moment pressing down like the mountains around them. Jackson stopped in front of her, his voice low but carrying. "You saved us, again." Said nothing. Her rifle hung at her side, her eyes steady. Jackson's jaw tightened, then loosened. His voice cracked, raw. "My brother, he would have wanted me to say this. I was wrong." The words hung in the air, heavy, unpolished, but real. His chest ached, but she only nodded once. "This isn't about me. It's about all of us making it home." Jackson swallowed hard, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Then welcome home." The team shifted, the silence breaking into something softer. Not applause, not cheers, but a recognition deeper than words. She wasn't just tolerated anymore. She was theirs. On the flight back, sat near the window, the night sky endless beyond the glass. She held her father's watch in her palm, the ticking faint but steady. For the first time, she didn't feel his ghost pressing down on her. She felt him beside her, quiet, proud, but letting her breathe her own air. She whispered into the dark, "I'm not you, Dad, I'm me, and that's enough." The helicopter's hum carried her words into the night, into the silence that followed. Months later, her name spread through the community. Not just as Samuel Carter's daughter, not just as the sniper who set records, but as Carter. The one who had stepped into the fire, who had carried a team that tried to break her, who had proven that excellence recognizes no boundaries, not gender, not legacy, not doubt. The legend grew, but she never chased it. She didn't need to. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. Sometimes it simply acts.